All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Um, I'm so excited, so darn excited. Kim, my lovely partner in crime, co-host for this new series. We did the first episode on Kim's channel a few weeks ago, and we're back. We feel so compelled to continue this, and we have a wonderful guest all the way from England. I think you said, where did you say you're from?
Cambridge.
Cambridge, yeah.
Cambridge, that's right.
Yeah.
I should have made that note.
No
David, thank you
worries.
so much. David Ditchfield, for
Pleasure.
all of you that maybe are new to him. Some of you might be familiar with him. We're so excited to have another conversation around the near-death experience. And we created, Kim and I, this series where we're calling it My Near-Death Experience, a Message of Hope. And what we're really, part of our intention is to give people a sense of hope. So through the sharing of the near-death experiences, that's one of the takeaways that I can say that I've got from hearing the story. So we're super excited. David, welcome. And we just want to maybe have you introduce yourself, tell us kind of who you are and who you were maybe before your experience, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Okay. Well, as you said, yeah, I'm based in Cambridge in the UK. So I was living in London actually before I had my near-death experience, before the accident that brought this on. And I've been living there for some years. Um, my life was a complete contrast then as to what it is now. It was a struggle, like for a lot of people. You know, I'd left school with very little qualifications because I'm dyslexic, and which I wasn't diagnosed with at the time when I was at school. So I was just seen as being trouble, you know, and not wanting to learn, which was completely untrue because I actually did want to sort of grasp what was going on in the classrooms and stuff like that. But anyhow, that wasn't to be the case. So when I left school, I decided to move to London in hope that I might be able to just kind of get a breakthrough in my life. And of course, moving to a capital city like all capital cities, it's very challenging. You know, it's very competitive. And in fact, most of the people that I befriended pretty much straight away were they were working in the music industry actually, and stuff like that, and media. So they were doing really well. They were great friends, great people, and I got on well with them. And I just wanted to be part of that world, but that was never going to happen. You know, so I was just really picking up sort of manual laboring work, blue collar work on construction sites, working in kitchens, washing up dishes and pots and pans, all sorts. You know, whatever I could do to make money. So yeah, so life was pretty much a struggle for me, and I was a square peg in a round hole, as they say. Yeah. So yeah, so that's where I was at before. Anyway, so London was my life, and then I ran out of money. I was pretty much broke, and I was about to lose my apartment. I was about to be evicted. And my sister and her family lived up in Cambridge, and they said, "Why don't you come and stay with us for a few days, just to get away? You need to clear your head. You know, you're in a bad place." So I did do. So I came up to stay, and it was I was there for a couple of weeks, and just before my trip up to meet them, I'd met somebody in London who I connected with, and we kept in touch by phone or what have you, and I said, "Why don't you come up and see me?" So she did. So she came up to stay for a few days, and it was her return trip to London that my whole life was about to change, because I took her to the rail station to see her off, and I helped her onto the car with her bags, and I gave her a hug and a kiss to say goodbye and what have you, and as I stepped back, the bottom part of my coat, it was a very cold day. I was wearing like this sheepskin coat, it was a very thick one, got trapped in the automatic closing doors, and I couldn't pull it free. You know, I tried everything that I could, of course, and it wasn't going to come out. And I looked around, there was no guard on the platform in the station. There was just one other guy behind me, and he saw what was going on, and he just said, "Take your coat off, mate." But I couldn't do, because of the quality of this sheepskin. It was just like it was stuck to me, like, and So I was pressing the buttons, I was banging on the windows, I screamed out for help in hope that somebody would appear, but nobody did. Then I heard the engines rev up on the train, and I just looked into the eyes of my friend who I was seeing off, and I just saw sheer terror, of course, in her eyes. She's looking right back at me, and I just thought, this is it. I thought this was the moment I was going to die, and it was all over. So I'd actually got time to think it through, which was very terrifying. But interestingly enough, I went into fight or flight mode, and I decided to fight. I decided I was not going to let this beast take me. The end of this train suddenly became a huge mechanical beast, and I thought, no, you're not going to take me. And it pulled out the station, and I felt every gear shift on that train. You know, you don't realize how fast they actually pull out of a station when you just sat down. You know, we all get our cell phones out and start texting or whatever, you know, and we don't think about the speed, the acceleration, but it's really fast. And I lost my footing. I was dragged along the platform edge, and then I was pulled between the space of that platform edge and the speeding train itself. And I was pulled there. I went underneath the wheels, and it was like being thrown into this sort of very violent machine, and being thrown around relentlessly. And the pain, of course, was incredibly immense, and the feeling of terror was really high. But I was still determined just to hang on in there. And I was suddenly then thrown down to the ground. I was in between the rail tracks, and the train was still going on. It was a very long train. It was I just kept my face down into the gravel, and because I knew that it wasn't all over yet, I thought some of the undercarriage of the actual train could have just hit me over the head, and it would all be over. But of course, that didn't happen, and it moved on. It moved on and sped off down the track and disappeared. And yeah,
Wow.
but the actual spiritual experience itself didn't actually happen until I got to the hospital. I was in a lot of agony. I was laid out on the track. You know, this lovely coat that I had been wearing was now ripped to shreds, and so was my arm. I remember seeing my arm completely ripped open, and it's interesting because I didn't go into panic. I just kind of remained calm and relaxed, because I think that's how I'd managed to save myself. And the paramedics arrived really quick, because there was a small hospital just around the corner from the station. So they jumped down onto the track. You know, it was like and somehow they cut through my clothes, got me onto a stretcher, and off that track, and then into the back of an ambulance. And I remember the actual doctor who was like in charge of the whole procedure in the back of the ambulance said, "Look, there's a small hospital around the corner where we've just come from, but the one that's going to save your life is a 25-minute drive. Do you think you can hang on?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go." And so the siren went on, and we just sped off like a rocket going out into space. It felt like, you know, and we just zoomed down that highway, and we arrived in the hospital. And when we got there, I remember looking, and I saw like there was a whole team of medics waiting for me, so that they'd been warned in advance what had happened. And I knew it wasn't all over yet, because I could hear terror in there. Not terror, but I could hear that they were frightened. You know, I didn't know what they were talking about, because it was all science going over my head. And I was losing a lot of blood at this stage as well. So it was all felt like it was still a bit hit and miss as to what was going to happen. And my family arrived. That was, time started to feel a bit strange, you know, because I remember the surgeon who was in charge of the whole thing turned around to me in the hospital and said, "Look, your family are here. Can you see them?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How many shall I send through?" I said, "Just send them all through, please, you know," because I needed that love, you know, I needed that reassurance. And I remember my mother was in tears, you know, she was obviously in complete shock. And it was interesting because one of the first things I said to her was, I said, "Mom, I'm just so sorry. It's always me bringing all the dramas to this family because that's how it was because life was such a struggle, you know." And of course, she said, "It's not your fault, you know," and just put her hand gently over my shoulder and said, "Please don't apologize. You know, we can't believe you're alive." And then I was concerned about my friend who I'd been seeing off because she'd been through this whole thing with me, you know. She would have watched the whole thing unfold, you know. And I looked to the back of the room in the hospital in the emergency department, and she was sat there, looking completely in shock. And I said, I need to speak to her. So she came over, and she was just shaking her head from side to side. She said, "I thought you were dead." They announced over the you know, the PA system that you died. And so, and she said, I watched it all as well. She said, I ran through the train and I looked through the window and I saw you go under. And she said, I just thought there's no way he's going to survive this.
Wow.
So
David,
yeah.
if I could just ask you, I want to go back to the part about the life before the NDE. And I'm
Yeah,
curious if you had, what was your relationship with spirit? What were, because you were asking for a breakthrough, is what you said. And I'm curious
yeah.
if there were thoughts around spirit, if you had a mindfulness practice. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I wasn't at all spiritually attached. You know, I wish I had been because life could have been a lot easier for me. I mean, I actually remember at one point praying, and this was when I was broke. And I remember I got the letter of the eviction had come through, and I remember I opened my refrigerator, and there was just like a bottle of beer. That was the only thing that was in there, and I just thought, wow, you know, this is how bad it's got. And I put my hands together and I prayed, but I didn't even know who I was praying to, you know, or what for. You know, I just
Mm.
prayed for help because I was so desperate. But interestingly enough, I did have a spiritual experience, which was by accident. And this was a couple of months prior to the actual accident itself. I'd taken another trip up to visit my sister and with her family. And when I was on that train, there was a couple sat opposite me, and they were confused about where their next station was, and I was trying to help them out. And she was an elderly lady, and she said to me, she said, "Oh, we're going to see a medium tonight." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I knew nothing about mediums, and I wasn't interested. So she said, you should come. She's great. She's a really good medium. She's virtually unknown, but she's brilliant." And I said, "Okay, thanks very much." And I remember I arrived at my sister's house and there was a lot of chaos going on because the kids were playing up. And I just said, "I'm just going to go to the bar and have a drink while you guys sort things out, and I'll come back later." And I went to the bar and I pulled this flyer out that the lady had given me about this medium, and something led me to go to the actual meeting, which was in a small spiritualist church. And I turned up and it was packed. And I found myself a seat and I sat down, and she was brilliant. She was like, a lot of people had gone there to get messages through from their loved ones who'd passed over. And I could see that how important it was for them to try and get that connection. But for me, I wasn't actually looking for anything at that stage in terms of I hadn't lost anybody in my life, so I wasn't looking for that connection. And but the medium turned around and she stopped, and it felt like a shift in the atmosphere. I remember at the time, and she was pacing around, and she would talk to her guides. You know, she'd be going, "Yes, yes, yes, sure." And she turned around, she said, "Gentleman in the blue sweater," which was me. She said, "Your life is about to change." And I
Wow.
went, "Really?" And I thought I was going to win the lottery, or I thought I was, you know, whatever. I was going to get the car, you know, save my apartment.
Yeah.
And I said, "In what way? How's it going to change?" And she said, she walked around, she was going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yes, I know." Yeah, she was all like this, very animated. And then she turned around, she said, "They're not telling me, but they just said, be prepared for it. You will be protected. You will be protected." And that was it. And so obviously I knew after that I had to find. I tracked it down eventually. This was after I'd come out of hospital and recovered. It was the first thing I wanted to do was try and find her. I thought I got to find that medium and speak to her and talk to her. Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting. I had wrote down mom, and I felt like the energy of mom, the spiritual aspect of your mother, when you back at at the train station when your coat got caught, I was like, I could feel your mom's energy in that. So I'm wondering if we could go back to that part. And were
Yeah.
you aware, because you're in the humanness of it, you're starting to the fight or flight, the panic, the people. I'm curious what if you had any, I don't know, talk about like more about the feeling, or if you had any awareness of anyone other than your own humanness when in that moment. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does, yeah.
mm,
It does because it, it was pointed out to me actually because when I went back to the spiritualist church to try and find this medium, I used to go each week to their services, and they'd have a guest medium come along, and there was one guest medium turned up, and her mother. Uh, we would have coffee afterwards, and she turned around to me, the mother, and said, "Look, I was a medium, but I don't practice anymore. You know, I've retired." And she said, "But I knew about your accident because it was all over the news at the time, you know." And she said, "You know that your grandfather was with you
mm,
and saved you that day." And I said, "Oh, that's amazing," because he kept coming through every time I was going to those church services. It's almost like I was like, it became a joke because every single medium who didn't know who I was would turn around and pick me out, and the people in the church would say, "Oh, it's him again," you know. And but they were picking out my grandfather an awful lot. So yeah, she said that my grandfather was there, and but what she said that was very interesting was that she said, "Do you know that you had a power animal that saved you that day as well?" And I said, "What's the power animal?" So she explained that the power animal was like this, you know, that was called in to save me against all odds, and so that power animal, she said, was a in the feline family, and it was a lioness. And I said, "That's great." And interestingly enough, when I tracked down that medium, and we chatted and stuff, and she it was at one of the services at the church, and so before I'd even got to talk to her afterwards, she picked me out again that night, and I know she was telling the truth. She hadn't remembered me at all from those 2 minutes previous, you know, and didn't know how I was, but she picked me out, and so she was interested. She was going, "Gentleman at the back there, why am I picking up? I'm picking up torn jeans. Have you torn your jeans recently? Have your trousers, are they shredded or something like that?" I was going, "Yes, I did," you know. And so we spoke afterwards and stuff like that, and she said, "Look, I'd love to give you a full reading, and if you'd like to come and meet me next week." So I said I would, and it's great because I walked in, and she said, "Oh, before we even start," she said, "I want to tell you that you're surrounded by cats. They're rubbing up against you." And she said, "But not only that, you've got a lioness that's just walked in with you." You know, I thought, so there you go. So that was pretty amazing.
And David, did you have a feeling that I know 'cause you said my life was kind of a mess and I was kind of figuring stuff out. Did you have a a, a gut feeling that you were off track,
mm.
that you should be somewhere else, or your life should be somewhere else, but you were over here? Um, was that what it felt like? Did you feel like you were off track at that point? Like this is not right?
Mm.
Yes, yes, I most certainly did. You know, for a long time, and the build up to the actual day of the accident, the atmosphere on the day of the accident was really strange. You know, I remember that my friend was packing her bag ready to go back to London, and my sister's cat, there we go, back to the feline family. My
Yeah.
sister's cat came into the room and jumped up on top of this very high filing cabinet. And my sister was living in a cottage at the time, so it was very low ceilings. And how he got up there, I have no idea. And he looked very uncomfortable because he was squashed in between this filing cabinet and this low ceiling. And he was just staring at me, and both my friend and myself noticed it, and I said, what is it, what are you trying to say to me? And I knew that he was trying to warn me as well, you know, that what was about to happen. And when we left the house, I remember turning around to my friend Anna, and I said, something feels strange today. Something feels really odd, and I don't know what it was. And she was like hesitating, taking her time, even though she got to get back for an appointment. She was in no rush, and she was almost like putting things off. She'd start doing things to almost distract herself from leaving, And it was kind of, so I knew that there was the atmosphere was definitely different that day, before it all happened. But another thing, going back to Kevin, what you were saying about the actual time of the accident itself, this is really odd because I remember as the train started to pull out, and I knew that I'd got time to think it through. Well, I thought I got loads of time to think it through.
Mm.
The UK Rail Police did a huge inquiry on it, and I remember asking them how long it took from the moment the train pulled off and then me going under. And he said 13 and a half seconds. They measured it. And I said, wow, it felt like minutes to me. And I remember thinking, right, I'd seen this news flash, a news that had been on a couple of weeks previous, where a small infant girl had been thrown from a burning apartment block from the third floor, for them to save her from the fire. And she landed without any injuries whatsoever. And they said the reason that happened is because infants don't tense up; they relax. Unlike us as adults, we tense up. So I
Mhm.
thought, relax, just relax. Remember that thing you saw on the news. And I had this thing that was giving me this calmness to be able to do that. And my friend Anna, who, when she ran through the train and saw me go under, she actually said to me in the hospital a couple of weeks later, she said, look, I know this is really bizarre, and I hope you don't think this is strange, but when you went under that train, you kind of rolled under with such grace. I said, I know I did, which is really bizarre. So there you go. So I was obviously being helped as well,
Wow.
just in my mind to be able to piece that together.
Wow. Amazing.
And
So many
Kevin, I'm
questions.
wondering if that mother energy you were picking up on was the lioness, because
Yeah,
that it
could
would be
the
a
pride
very
of it.
like protective
Mhm.
energy, right?
Yeah,
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 very
yeah,
interesting.
so
My gosh.
powerful. So bring us back to you're in the hospital room, your mom's there, family starting to show up. What
yeah.
occurred after that?
Well, what occurred after that was I left my body. Then I left all the drama of the hospital and the agony that I was in. And I remember going from the very bright fluorescent strip light to what appeared to be a very warm, darkened light. I was in a darkened. I thought I was in a darkened room to start off with, and I looked around me to see what was happening, and I was greeted by these orbs of light that were slowly pulsating all around me. There were colors of ambers, greens, reds, and yellows, and gold. And I felt safe. I figured at that stage, because as I said earlier, that I knew it was all hit and miss. And I thought, this is it. I must be dead.
Mhm.
I must have passed on to the next stage. And I didn't fight it. I didn't resist it. I mean, I've since learned that some people who have near-death experiences do try to resist it because they've got so much to live for. They've got young kids and stuff.
Mm.
I didn't want to die, but I hadn't got that same pull, as you know. As I said to you, my life was in such a mess before, and after the drama and the horror of the whole accident, it kind of felt great just to be in this warmth and this safety of this place that I was now in. Um, so I tried to get my bearings, and I realized I was no longer laid out on the hospital trolley. And I was on this rock. It was like a huge kind of like slate rock. I describe it as being like a medieval altar. There's the best way to describe it. And it was strangely comfortable. It was very comfortable to lay on. Normally, you wouldn't be able to lay out on a granite rock without any clothes on, because I realized I was no longer clothed. I was just covered in this blue sheet. Actually, it was like a blue satin, silky textured sheet that made me feel, it was like a comforting sheet. And of course, the first thing I wanted to do was check my wounds, check my body, because I had seen the mess it had been in before. And everything was back in place. There wasn't a single scratch or bruise. Everything was just there. So I just laid my head back, and I laid on this rock, and I remember closing my eyes and just relaxing for a while. And then I could see just through my eyelids the light that was starting to appear through my eyelids. And so I opened my eyes, and just above me were like these three symmetrical grids of white light that were closing in slowly above me. And I looked into this light, and it was just so bright and pure and white that normally, the human eye wouldn't be able to take that kind of light.
Mm.
But in this realm, I could. I could take that light, and it was just like in fact, I couldn't take my gaze away from it, because I knew that this light had a healing force to it. It was like it was. I felt like it was, it was healing all the trauma that I'd just been through, just mentally and physically. So I went with it, and again, I just closed my eyes and I just kind of bathed in this beautiful white light, and then I felt the presence of somebody. I felt like somebody had walked into the scene. So I lifted my head, and there, just stood at my feet, was this beautiful androgynous being. Just stood there with this pure, very white blonde hair and skin that was radiating light from within. This beautiful skin, and this person was wearing a very contemporary black t-shirt, nothing too ethereal that you might expect, just a very contemporary black t-shirt, which it was, at the time, I thought that was kind of amusing to me. I thought, I like that, that's great. And but I felt I knew this person, and I actually said out loud, I said, "Who are you? I know you. I know your face. And I can't place where from." And this being just kept smiling back at me and said nothing.
Mm.
Um, but I knew that this person was protecting me, and I felt very safe. There was no sense of fear at all in this realm for me. And so I laid back again, and as I continued to lay back, and the healing force was still coming through, I felt the presence of more people had arrived at the scene, if you like, and I opened my eyes, and there were two female forms to my left and right. The girl to my right was dark skinned, but quite European looking, with a very simple brown dress on. Whereas the girl to my left she was more Asian Indian, American Indian, or Brazilian perhaps, and she had like a very traditional sort of dress on, like a white sort of outfit, and they had their hands just slowly hovering over my body, and their hands were just healing me. I just felt that same essence that was coming from the light was coming from their hands, but it was a lot more powerful. It was a lot more intense. And I figured at this stage that they were healing beyond just the physical trauma that I'd just been through. I felt that they were peeling away all those years of misunderstood, sort of, you know, trauma that we all go through in life, or just the baggage that we call it, that I'd been carrying around with me. All those layers were being taken off bit by bit until it was getting down to the pure essence of my soul. And it was just the most liberating feeling I'd ever experienced. I'd never had anything like that before. And that's what I've been searching for. But when you said earlier, do you think that, that I was aware that my life needed to change? But that was a moment when I felt, yes, this is what I've been searching for. This is getting down to the pure essence of me, down to my soul.
Mm. I think you just answered the next question I had. So you're in this realm, you still have awareness, you still have these feelings, a little deeper. You're not in the fear. So are you still in the full awareness of David, human, or is there something else? Like, is there, I don't know, not to separate them, but is your awareness, is it still in the fullness of David Ditchfield, the human,
Yeah.
or is it something,
It's
can you speak to that?
No, I can do, yeah, because it's totally me, but it was like completely me, like I'd never been in my whole life. Um,
Mm.
because there was no sense of time here. I suddenly realized that time didn't exist. Time wasn't, it was totally relative. And I also realized now that I'd spent most of my life up until that point concerned about time. I was concerned about the past mistakes I'd made, opportunities I'd missed, all those things were always going through my head. And I was concerned about the future as well, because understandably, I was about to lose my apartment. I was broke. So everything was all based around the past and future. Whereas suddenly that didn't matter anymore. all that mattered was the fact that I was in the present moment, and that was a great place to be. And so yeah, so it was me, but without all the anxieties that I carried around, all the feelings of failure. I just felt complete. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It was earlier as you were talking, and you had mentioned being in this prayer, and you were having this eviction. You were being evicted from your apartment and being in this prayer, and Spirit made me write down eviction to trust. And it was this taking us deeper into that trust, and you really, it was a bit of an aha hearing what you just shared in the coming together. I think so often we try to walk this life in the humanness and in the spiritual or the soul aspect of who we are, and in it we're all of it. It's that oneness, it's that wholeness, and not, there is no separation. And so you going to that deepest place of trust with no ounce of fear is that wholeness. And so thank you. That just kind of, and Spirit has said that to me time after time after time. They want us to walk this life in that oneness of the human
Mm,
aspect and the spiritual aspect of who we are. It's not separate.
absolutely.
So that's
Yeah.
really beautiful. So good.
And David, I had a question about when you were, besides the one that you're kind of like, I recognize you, I know you,
Mm.
was there a sense of home or recognition of this place, or did it just feel like I just want to stay here, or I'm completely comfortable here? Yeah, was there any of that?
Um, I, I guess it did feel like I'd come home, yeah, actually,
Mm,
because as I said to you, I'd never felt so complete in my whole life, and I felt loved. There was the love that was coming from that all three beings was so strong. It was unconditional love, and so that was a feeling of coming home, yeah, because I life was just, to me before, it was like walking through a wind tunnel and not being able to move forward
Right.
at all. So
mm.
yeah, it felt safe and home. Yeah.
How do you look at time now?
Do you know what? I barely think about it, and it actually
Mm,
jars with me. It's like sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, do you know it was 5 years ago since we did this, or is it?" And things like that. And they said, "Did you realize that?" And I said, "No." I said, "You know what? I don't like to think about time because it's just it's come what may. It's just a
mm,
negative thing to carry. We should just be in the present moment and stay. And the present moment is the only one that exists.
right.
And so I don't think about time because you know both what I realized looking back from that experience was that the past is now. I mean, it does exist. The past does exist, obviously, but it's somewhere out there floating around in the universe and stuff. And it's a story, and just like the future as well. We think about time. We say, "Oh, we've got to be there in an hour, and this is going to happen in an hour. It's going to be a great night. It's going to be a brilliant night, and all these different things." And
Mhm.
and we don't know that it's going to be like that. It's a story that we're creating, and especially when people get upset. And sometimes I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was worried about something, a scenario that was about to happen, and she said, "I'm just so worried this is going to happen." And I was going, "You don't know. That's just a story that you're creating. You don't know that's how it will turn out." And it's interesting that it didn't turn out anything like what she thought. That her fear, her speaking mind was telling her, "This is how it's going to be. It's going to be awful," and stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I don't really think about time too much now.
Well, and that's what I thought when you were talking about how you didn't really have any fear. You were kind of just going with it. It was in the moment. You were just kind of like, okay, now I have a blue sheet and I'm laying on this thing and it's everything's
Yes.
fine.
Yeah.
But I thought also you're clearly not, you were out of the space of your human brain, because that's where everything is, right? That's where the past and the future is. That's where all the stuff we make up, that's the fear, is in this
That's
human
it.
brain. So you're clearly a more pure consciousness than
Mhm.
you're not in the physical body anymore. Is what it is.
That's it,
Yeah.
and that's what where it's all at. That's what I try. That's how I try to lead my life now. You know, is to try to. Of course, you know, you don't come back from a near death experience superhuman. You
Mm.
still got all those emotions and anxieties and stuff like that. But when they do happen to me, I try to say, "Whoa, just remember, you know, where that moment, where you were, how it was, how you felt, that moment of completeness." And that was because you weren't fearing the future and stuff. And so I have to remind myself of that as well. But yeah, you know, because the thinking mind is just it's such a crazy thing, you know, and it can take over, and it can it can monopolize your life in a negative way, and it very rarely does it monopolize in a positive way, you know. So we've got to get down to the pure essence of our soul and allow that just to be. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Right.
In addition to what you've shared, how has it enhanced your life?
Well, it's what it has done is I'm now I'm creative now. I mean, I
Mm.
paint and I write
Okay.
music and all these different things that I never thought I would be able to do. And um, and this all started because I remember when they after my near death experience itself, I remember they rolled me into theatre and I was under for about 8.5 hours. And I remember they'd given me my own room in the hospital. And I was in the hospital room and I was there, and I remember it was about 2 a.m. and it was just me and this little machine bleeping next to me. And I got tubes and wires coming out of me. And of course, I was dealing with the horror of what had just happened in the train accident. But I was more preoccupied with the whole spiritual journey that I'd just been on, the near death experience. And I knew nothing about near death experiences at this point because, as I say, I was non-spiritual, so I didn't follow any threads, you know, to realize what had happened. And I was scared I was going to forget it all because, in my mind, I wanted to tell as many people about this as possible. I wasn't thinking, oh, I can't, I'm not going to tell anyone. They could think, oh, this is crazy. I thought, no, this has happened and it's far too important to ignore. And I thought the best way to record it is by painting it. And
Oh,
so I thought, I'm going to do a huge painting like those big biblical scenes that the Renaissance painters did, you know, in Rome, you know, in the Vatican. And that's what I wanted to do. And there was this sense of sort of like ambition, and nothing was going to stop me from doing that. So I remember the nurses came in, and well, my sister came actually to visit the very first night. And she was speaking very softly. She said, look, is there anything I can get you? I said, yeah, can you get me a small A5 sketch pad and a pencil? And she went, okay. So she thought I'd lost the plot, but she got them for me. And then she came in, and then the nurses propped me up. And I could barely, I was so weak, you know, I've still got those sketches and you can barely see what's going on. But I'd sketched the outline of what was going to be my very first painting. And so, yeah, so from that point on, I realized that I was being helped to create these paintings. You know, I couldn't stop once I started, and um, and so then I learned about channeling. I learned that I was channeling ideas through to help me because I'd never been to art school to be able to learn how to paint like this. So it's like I was given a crash course in how to, you know, apply colors onto a canvas to create skin tones and light reflection, and all those things came together. And so yeah.
Your
So
art is fantastic. I do have to say,
oh, thank
David,
you.
we're Facebook friends, and I've seen just a one or two of the pieces, and they're wow, powerful. And you can feel that that influence of spirit is in your art and in that expression. Right. And so spirit wants to go back, David, to when you're in the conversation and the messages, the information that the beings, the energies that you were aware of. How did that conversation, what did that look like? And what kind of messages did they give you?
Well, it was telepathy. They didn't actually speak to me orally, which I was hoping for at first. As you know, I was asking the first guy, you know, who you are and stuff, and I got no answer. But it was all telepathy that was coming through, not just from them, but from the universe itself was sending through messages, and it was it was telling me that first of all that I am loved, that that almost as if to say your life before you never felt it, and you always felt you were wrong and you felt shame and guilt, but all those things don't belong to you. And what really belongs to you is what we've now got down to. We've peeled away all those layers, and what you're feeling now is you, the authentic, true you. And you've got to take that with you, and you've got to carry that through into your life. So I've never forgotten that, and that's something that I try to hang on to. As I said earlier, you don't come back from a near-death experience superhuman, but which we always we did, but you don't. You come back with emotions and stuff, and fears and anxieties. But when those moments in my life, when I face any trouble, then I try to remember. Well, I don't try to. I remind myself of those words, and that I'm loved, and that I'm not that person that I figured that I'd been made. We're all made out to be. We're all, like I say, we've all been through that in our lives, where we've had,
Mhm.
adults basically teachers at school that are irresponsible by making us feel, like we carry this tag with us throughout our lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
knowing
mean,
that,
oh, go
so
ahead,
sorry,
Kim. No, please.
knowing that love that you have, that were you, did you did you meet that with emotion
Mm.
or thankfulness, or like, of course I'm loved. Why did I forget I'm loved? Or how did you take that?
Well, to be honest with you, I was so charged with this energy of love that it felt great, that I was just filled with happiness. So I didn't kind of like, just, I wasn't in like a sense of like calmness and say, okay, I'm loved. I was like, wow, this is great. This is like a really brilliant
So
feeling.
complete acceptance, it sounds
Yeah.
like, just like
Oh,
this is
yeah, I totally
that.
accepted it. I accepted that love, and there was no sort of resistance. There was no sense of like, say, for example, before, if I'd been given that amount of love by a group of people before, on the earth realm, if you like, I would have said, oh, no, 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 you've got it all wrong. I'm not worthy of this. I'm
Right.
not the guy you think I am. Just I mean, whereas in this space, I didn't have any of those feelings at all. So I was completely open to the love that was being given, and I just I let it come right through. Yeah.
So
Amazing.
good.
So when so we kind of left off where you're kind of in that mode of kind of receiving the love from the light. You're getting healed, it sounds like, and kind of healed from your life on earth. And
Yes.
then where does your story go from there?
The story goes from there that I started to think about my family, because obviously as I said earlier, they were very traumatized. My mum was in tears, and I thought, well, clearly I'm dead now, and so they're going to be really upset. They're going to be really torn apart. So I thought I'd try and edge my way over the side of this huge rock that I was on and see if I could see them. So I looked right over and I peered down, and I didn't see them. I couldn't see them. But what I did see was this most incredible, beautiful sight. It was like a waterfall of stars, but it was like a waterfall the size of Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls. It was vast. But instead of like millions of tons of water cascading over the edge, it was billions of sparkling stars that were just tipping over. And there were like, I looked down, there were like shooting stars just flying through the middle. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I realized that I wasn't in a small darkened space that I first figured. I thought I'm actually in the universe itself. So I was suddenly aware of being part of the universe, which was really amazing. And I looked down, and the more I fixed my gaze, the deeper I looked, I started to see like, it was like looking through one galaxy into another, and I could see nebulas forming. I could see colors, all sorts of beautiful forms that, in fact, that I've painted since. And interestingly enough, some of those forms that I saw uh, have been captured by the
The
Hubble
telescope.
telescope.
I
And
knew
I
you were
remember
going to say that, David. I knew
Yes.
you
So
were going
good.
to say that. So weird. I was going to ask you about that, but I knew you were going to say that. So anyway, go
yeah,
ahead.
fantastic. Yeah, we're connecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really quite a breakthrough for me, because it was a moment of affirmation, because
Mm.
I'd already painted something that I hadn't actually seen, and neither had anybody else. So there was this item on the news where there were these images that had come through from the far reaches of our galaxy that the Hubble had taken, and no one had seen these photos before. And one of my friends got in touch, and then my sister said, "Hey, are you watching the news?" And I said, "No, why?" I said, "Switch it on. It's your paintings, and stuff."
Oh
And
my
so it
gosh.
took them to point that out to me, that it looked like what I painted and stuff. So that was a lovely moment of affirmation that, science had brought back something that connected with what I was looking at, what I'd seen in my near-death experience. Yeah.
Wow.
It's so weird. And the reason I was going to ask you about that is because when I've seen those pictures, there are a few I almost can't look at because I almost feel like homesick, which
Oh,
is a really weird thing. And I can't
Oh, wow.
explain it and I don't understand it, but I'm
Yeah.
almost just like, it almost makes me feel a little like homesick. And I'm just like, that's so weird. Why do I feel like that? I'm just looking at the galaxy, but
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that. So it's so interesting that you say that. I just felt like you were going to say something like that.
so good. How did it
Yeah.
enhance your psychic abilities, if you would acknowledge
Oh,
them in that capacity?
I mean, it didn't enhance it in as much as I didn't. I'm not clairvoyant, and I'm not a medium myself. All it did was, I would say, that it enhanced it in as much that uh, with my paintings and then my music that followed on, I
Yeah.
realized that I was channeling all these ideas through to be able to help me to bring all this together.
Mm.
And I'd say but I think that it's more of an ability than anything else, just to be able to do that, to be able to know when I'm channeling, to know when those ideas are coming through, to actually allow them in. I don't. It's like, wow. It's like with the paintings. That's when I first noticed it. In the first week of the very first painting that I was doing, I remember thinking, I'd sit back in my chair and look at this canvas. I was going, wow, this is amazing. This is like not me painting this alone. I'm getting help, and I was like a big fan of my own work. So so I knew how to continue to allow this to come through, and it's something that we can all do. Again, it's all back to what you were saying, Ken, with the thinking mind. It was just it's allowing the thinking mind to come off and switch it off, which, when you watch some of the great performers, for example, if you watch any great singer that you like, or musician, uh, say Jimi Hendrix, for example, as a guitarist, if you watch Jimi Hendrix playing, you can tell that he's channeling.
Mm.
He's not just going through the motions. There's no thinking mind going on there. He's switched off, and he's allowing the universe to come right through into his guitar playing and his singing and whatever. And any great performer will be doing that, whether it's musical or even sports. That's why we love watching these people. That's why we love watching tennis players. If you think about it, a game of tennis is quite boring. It's just two people going backwards and forwards with a ball, with a racket. But we love watching them because they're channeling, because they're really going, they're in the moment. So yeah.
What compels you to share your experience?
I guess going right back to that moment when I came around in the hospital room, that I thought, I've got to tell as many people about this as possible, and that's continued, because I feel that it's important to be able to share with everybody that there is more to this life than what we feel. That let's face it, in Western civilization, we don't talk about death. We don't even approach it, really, which is crazy, because we plan for everything else. We plan for birth, marriage, taking our driving test or whatever. We don't plan for death. And so I guess it's important for me to be able to get the message across, first of all, to say that life continues on. That
Mm.
it doesn't. We don't just switch off like a light switch and it's all over. The soul is a really strong entity, and that's what I learned. That my soul continued on, and it was very strong and powerful. And our soul, all of us, our souls continue on. So it's very important for me to talk about that. But also, it's become more important as well for me now to be able, especially with all the troubles that the world is at, all the chaos that the world is going through, to be able to try to talk about that that letting go of that fear, letting go of the thinking mind, which is saying that the future is not looking great, and it's taking away that fear element, you know, and trying to be in the present moment and say, hang on a sec, I've just watched the news, and the news is just feeding all this fear, because the news does. That's how the news has worked since the days of newspapers, you know, where they sold headlines, you know, that's how they sold their newspapers. And it's still the same with social media, TV news, or whatever. It's all, they hang on to the fear. And so it's just letting go of that fear and saying, hang on, we don't know what the outcome of this story is going to be, because it is a story of the future. So it's just trying to bring that, you know, into the present.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when you're in so you're kind of witnessing this cascade of stars coming down, and I love that imagery of the almost like Niagara Falls of stars, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes. So how does this experience where do you go from there? And do you have a choice to come back, or do you just kind of end up back in your hospital bed?
Yeah. Well, basically, I don't feel that I didn't have a choice. You know, I wasn't. I know that some people say that they are given a choice and stuff, but for me, what happened was, I think that the very final part of my actual near-death experience was the most profound moment, because it was when I'd lay back again, and it was that, and I was like, and my eyes were closed, and this energy of love, this unconditional love, was suddenly turned up like a big dial. And suddenly I felt like every molecule of my body was vibrating with this love. And I thought, what's going on? You know, and I lifted my head again. And just behind the being of light who was stood at my feet was this huge tunnel of white light that was coming through the universe, and it was getting closer and closer to me. And it was very awe-inspiring. It was like surrounded by very strong, powerful flames that were going right around the edges of this white light. And again, normally I would be quite terrified by something like this, because it was very vast. But I was more excited. I was going, wow, this is incredible. And it felt great because this energy of love was coming from this source of light. And so I was being told that what I was looking at here was the source of all creation. You know, this was God. This wasn't the image of God that I figured God would look like, you know, the guy with the grey beard, you know, on the ceiling of the Vatican in Rome. You know, this was it. It was coming from this tunnel of white light. And I remember laughing to myself. I was just filled with so much delight and happiness. And it was just as I threw my head back laughing that I suddenly came crashing back into my body in the hospital, in the emergency department, and all the pain came rushing through. You know, suddenly from that beautiful white light, it was back to the fluorescent strip. But I was okay with that. You know, I was okay. So even though I didn't make the choice to come back, I was just so filled with this energy of love and everything that I'd been through that I was just really happy. You know,
It sounds almost in its innocence, it sounds almost childlike. Do you think that when we're children, we kind of are close to our true self?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is because, you know, as the years go on, as we start going to school, and then as the more years that we put on, yeah, the more the thinking mind takes over, and the more the frame network where we feel that we've got to fit in and we've got to be this person or that person. Whereas children, they don't act, you know, basically. There's no pretentiousness there. They are completely real. I witnessed that this morning, actually. Yeah, I was out, and I just saw there was and I saw a group of really young kids, and they got up to sing, and they were singing. And when they finished that performance, when they stepped down off this little stage, there was no sense of like adults kind of like, oh yes, I'm the great I am, I've just performed, you know. There was none of that. That just, I mean, looked in their eyes, I thought there's just total realness coming from them. You know, they'd enjoyed what they'd just done, but there was no sense of like, that. And I just thought that's where it's at. And going back to what I said earlier as well about the news item about the child being thrown from the burning apartment block, not tensing up because the
Right.
children are relaxed. We just get more and more tense the further we go through life because of all those pressures that are put on us that we put upon ourselves as well. So yeah.
Wow.
And so when you come back and people see you in the hospital after you come back from this experience, do they see a difference? Do they feel a difference around you?
Yeah, that was actually very, very prominently so. Just about everybody that I knew, because I got loads of visitors coming, friends and family, and they would straight away. Obviously, they were expecting the worst. When I walked in. I mean, I looked pretty banged up. I got, as I say, tubes and wires coming at me when they walked into the room, but they were saying, "Wow, you just look great." One of my friends said, "You look so animated," and then uh, and my parents, that was the interesting one because it took me a week to tell them about the experience
Mm.
because they're Christian, so they were going to church, and I thought it's going to jar probably with their faith, but I really wanted them to get it. And so when I told them the whole story, it was a week later in the hospital. My mum turned around afterwards and she said, "We know." I said, "Mom, you know? How do you mean you know?" She said, "David, whenever we walk into this room, because I've got this room," she said, "you're just glowing and you're just radiating like we've never seen you before." And she said, "And you're giving out all this love and strength to everyone around you. And you're the one who should be getting all that love and strength given to you." So
Wow.
so yeah, it was very, very well noted by people who knew me well. Yeah.
Beautiful. Would you agree? This is a two-part question. Would you agree, first of all, that your NDE deepened your understanding of your life purpose or one of your life purposes? And for people that are looking to discover their life purpose or some of their purposes in life without having an NDE, what would you say to that?
I'd say what it starts, like it did with me, with self-love.
Mm,
Once you find that self-love, then you find that self-worth and self-confidence. But not only that, it's going back to what you were saying earlier, Kim, about children and stuff like that, and me saying that they don't act. It's trying to lose all that sense of trying to act, because I was doing a lot of that before. I was trying to be someone else. I was trying to be the person that wasn't me. And my message is really important, that try to get in touch with your authentic self. Doesn't matter what it is, whether you don't like it at first, get in touch, because that is you. And once you accept that authentic you, then you'll find that things will start to come through, like with me, with my creativity that weren't there before, that I allowed them to start coming through. And it doesn't have to be, music or art. It could be anything. You read these stories about these guys who were working on Wall Street or whatever, or the city in London, and they suddenly say that they burn out, and they said, "I'm going to get out of this now. I'm going to go and buy a farm," and then they do, and then they suddenly find that they've been true to themselves for the first time in their lives, and they're doing something that they never thought they could do before. And as I say, it doesn't have to be creative. It could be anything. Well, actually, no, most things are creative, but
mm.
just I'm saying, it doesn't have to be art or music. It could be anything, and you'll find it if you're true to yourself. You find that authentic thing that's in there, which is you. Yeah.
Mm. So
Well, and I have a question about, I have a theory about NDEs and why we're hearing, well, first of all, we can share them, in a kind of a worldwide way now because of, the web and how we can connect. But we hear a lot of them now, and I I'm wondering if, because so often there are messages like you said, you finding that authentic part of yourself and kind of going with that and going within, but there's also this message of there's no death, there's no
mm,
death, life goes on,
Hmm.
life goes
Yeah.
on. And I'm wondering, do you think there's a possibility that um, maybe our progress on earth is being impeded a little bit by being so afraid of death that that people are still so afraid of death that maybe we're kind of being given this information now so that we can live differently and kind of evolve and progress to another, I don't know, another
Yeah.
way we're supposed to be living or supposed to be kind of
Yeah.
moving on from it. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I mean, I certainly felt that shift globally when the whole pandemic thing first happened, you know, and
Right.
I suddenly thought that everybody seemed to at first be adjusting to the fact that they're getting out of, they weren't going to work anymore. No one was commuting. They weren't getting on the trains and going through the treadmill and getting into a very competitive environment. And people were suddenly turning around and appreciating nature, saying, "Oh, I'm baking bread for the first time in my life. I'm teaching my kids from home. It's great, you know, and nature's fantastic." Oh, and I thought, this is brilliant. This is what the world needs. I mean, sadly, I do feel that people let go of that too quickly and said, "Oh, we want to get back to normal now. We need to get back into our jobs and our careers and things like that." And also, businesses were very keen to encourage people back. But in saying that, in the UK, there's a huge gap now. Like in that, for example, that it's been all over the news where they're saying a lot of people are not returning to work now, and it's affecting the
Yeah.
economy and stuff like that. Which is, of course, the economy is important, and all those things are important. But I thought, well, that's great for me. I thought that's great to hear that those people have actually turned around and thought, no, you know, that they kind of like have stopped and they're allowing themselves to be they'll be more spiritually attuned,
Right.
which is really important, you know, and yeah, and as I say, with the energy of the world right now, because of those energies, because of so much negativity and fear, that it affects us all. It affects me, you know. I don't know about you two, but I feel that I can I tune into that energy, and sometimes I have to guard myself because it's there, yeah, because it's so strong, it's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. What a treat.
Thank you so much, David. This
So
has been
good, David.
so
Thank
Have
fascinating.
you.
you've written a book, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Despite
Yeah.
being dyslexic, yeah. So that was it. My book's called Shine On, and
Yeah.
so yeah, so that came out actually in the pandemic. So that was kind of great for me
Oh,
because
wow.
yeah, because I was dreading going out and sort of promoting it because I just don't know where to start. You know, but then, you know, I ended up just doing lots of Zoom meetings like this and speaking to people like yourselves and so yeah, so it's been really well received, which is fantastic. And not only that, it's reaching out to people that you wouldn't normally, who don't normally sort of, you know, who are non-spiritual, if you like, but are fascinated by the stories. So
Mhm.
which is great because that's what I want. I want more and more people to sort of be able to sort of come in and broaden the audience more and more. Not to sell books, but just to get that story out there and to talk more and more about spirituality, and which is a really important part of my life now. I mean, you know, I go to spiritual healing every week, which is great for me. You know, it's just like I started that when I went back to find that spiritualist church, to find that medium. You know, and I'd go to the very first service I went to, and I was all banged up with all sorts of plaster all over me, and sort of, and they said, "You look in a pretty bad way," and we do spiritual healing. You know, I said, "Great, I'll give it a go." So I've never stopped going, and that's because it not only healed, it sped up my healing process very quickly, but not only that,
Mhm.
I realized how much it helps me just to sort of just to attune myself with the energies of the being in that place, and you know, it's the closest I've come to being back in that realm. Yeah.
Oh, right. And so where can people see your art, David? Do you show it or can you find it online or on Instagram?
Yeah,
Where is it?
you can, if you can go to my website, which is called Shine On the Story, and you can see it on there. And then you'll find my social media links, which if you want to follow me, like Instagram and YouTube, I've got a YouTube channel and stuff like that. And you can see how I put my paintings together on the YouTube channel. Um, but also one of my paintings, if you're in the US, is going to be on show. The Museum of the Bible in Washington D.C. have just have loaned one of my paintings, so that's going up mid-April, I think it is. So that's going to be there, yeah. So which is great because it's
Yeah.
brilliant that the message. I never would have thought that the Museum of the Bible would want to, sort of. They're fascinated by near-death experiences. So it just shows how NDEs are becoming more and more talked about. So I'm really honoured, that they just want my painting, but they'd like to talk about near-death experiences in an exhibition there. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Brilliant. I love it. Well, thank you for shining on us today. I know this was
My pleasure.
wonderful. Keep shining on. We're going to put all of David's contact info, all of his places to find and see him in the description box. And this is wonderful. I could keep talking
Thank you.
all day or listening.
Yeah, me too. I'm loving it as well. Yes.
It's wonderful. David, a pleasure. Kim, a pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
David.
so
My
good.
pleasure.
All right.
Great
Bye
to
for
meet you
now.
both. Okay, bye.